Hi, folks. All right. Today is going to be a very special chat with my dear friend Arjun Sagar Gupta. We're going to wait a few minutes to have a few people log in, including Arjun himself, and we will take it from there. So I hope everyone's got themselves some tea or coffee, or in case it's that time of the evening, which I think it is, you pull out a nice cold beer or a glass of wine. And we will start in a few minutes. All right. In case you are curious, this conversation or these conversations are really about giving people that we love a chance to talk about the music that they love. So the playlist that Arjun has put out is available on Spotify, on Apple Music, and on YouTube, and the links are in the bio, so you can click on that if you have a laptop nearby and put it on. For copyright reasons, I obviously can't play all of this stuff, otherwise this video gets flagged and there's a whole different thing. But we are going to be good to go in a minute. I see Arjun has joined. We're going to wait for some of our faculty. The other thing is that I know this is a little departure from our regular 8 p.m., but Arjun also runs a club, which we're going to talk about in a minute, in case you haven't heard of it. It's the Piano Man Jazz Club, and he has a show tonight. So we have to do this a little earlier than usual. If you're tuning in later, we're going to start in a minute. Okay. Let me send Arjun a request. Arjun, I sent you.
Hello.
There you are. Arjun, can you hear me okay?
Hello.
All right.
Yes,
Cheers. This Insta Live, guys. Insta Live. There's just so many platforms these days. Twitch, Facebook. It's hard to keep up. So at least we stick to one and we make this work. Anyway, as I explained, these conversations are really about music and about trying to understand what makes people tick. And for those of you who are joining in now, I want to give you a little context about Arjun. Arjun Sagar Gupta. He's a dear friend. He's a person I respect very much as an entrepreneur, as a musician, and a colleague. I've seen The Piano Man since its inception, and Arjun has seen the inception of the Goa Jazz Academy much later. But there's been a really strong symbiotic relationship, I think, in the way that we're approaching what we love, which is music, but also I would say everything else that surrounds it makes it possible to be musicians. Arjun runs the Piano Man Club brand, and there's the Piano Man clubs, which are in Delhi, which in itself they've had a few iterations, and we're going to talk about that. But there's also the Piano Man Artist Management, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit. So Arjun, let's go back a little bit before the Piano Man became what it is, and let's talk about your early experiences with music. You studied classical piano. You're classically trained, and you studied at the Delhi School of Music, right?
I started pretty late,
Okay.
You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
So I think the earliest influence would simply be the fact that my father, through his job, traveled a lot. And he, instead of chocolates and toys, he brought back music and art.
Amazing.
So I had the opportunity to listen to music from all over the world. Right. And at that time, it was very difficult to access global music, right? Because now you got just an infinite number of ways to access almost anything.
Right.
But in the late 80s, early 90s, it wasn't. It was what you get at the music store, what's on radio, and that's about it. So I grew up listening to pan flutes from Chile. I grew up listening to I remember this one album called Mozart l'Egyptien, which was an Arabic singer singing over like Mozart concertos. Like
Very
it's
cool.
really interesting and all phenomenal music. And my father's youngest brother is also quite into like jazz and stuff. So he would always have like Antonio Carlos Jobim, some bossa nova stuff. He had one of my favorite albums growing up, which was in fact one of those songs is in the playlist. This is Drume Negrita, Bola de
Oh
Ni,
yeah.
Bolos
Right.
No, yeah. You listen to it. I mean, Bola de Ni was from what I know of him, he was a gay black man in the Castro regime in Cuba, which is itself a miracle that he survived. Let's not get into those
Incredible.
conversations, but the fact is that he's incredible. His music is transcendent. His piano playing, his singing, I love it. That album, which was a mix of artists. It wasn't just him, but that song, his voice is stuck in my head like when I was 10 years old. I never forget.
So by the way, guys, you can click on the link in the bio and just access the playlist on whatever you prefer, Spotify. I mean, it's up and running. So if you want a little background to this conversation, background music, please do check it out.
That'd be cool.
It would be cool. I mean, I can't do it. I wish I could, but anyway.
Yeah.
But Arjun, this is an important transition because you didn't really necessarily grow up listening to jazz, right? I mean, you listened to a lot of music, right?
Yeah.
So do you remember that turning
not
point?
even a lot. I listened to a lot of maybe Michael Jackson and ABBA and the usual.
Okay. Yeah. What we all did in the 80s and 90s.
1942, A Love Story, one of my favorite Hindi soundtracks.
Right. Great. But do you remember the pivot, sort of a pivot point when it came to jazz? I mean, what was it that kind of? Because I mean, I just want to prefix this. I mean, you before we had jazz clubs. I mean, before we had this kind of burning desire and this place to go and watch things and places where we could go study, you were into this. You were into jazz. So I want to sort of get a little bit into that.
I don't know. I don't think it was before particularly. I mean, it must have been end of middle school, like 7th, 8th, 9th, that sort of, class 7, 8, 9, not 7, 8, 9 years old. And I think there were 2 or 3 things that happened. One is Star World came out. This is a brand new TV channel, and in one of their ads, they had that, I like the East, I like the West, the North and South, they're both the best. Baby, if you know what I mean, I love being here with you. And, and I was like, what sound is this, dude? Like, the harmony behind it and the chords that they're hitting. And on one of the same things, I think that song was being sung by Tony Bennett on that ad. And my brother really helped me track it down. My memory is a little fuzzy because I got shit memory, but it was either that or another similar song. And at the same time, my brother also gave me a CD, which I thought he gave out of love, but later I found out maybe he didn't like it so much. But that kind of changed my music listening completely. This was Louis Armstrong playing W.C. Handy's Blues. I mean, all my old interviews and all, I always talk about this one album. In fact, the first song on the list is a song from that album, Loveless Love. And like that album is like, though I haven't heard it now for a couple of years, just simply because of life. But I heard it so much over 20 years that it's etched in my mind. Almost every single note is etched in my mind. We all have that album.
Well, what great vocabulary to choose from, right? I mean, Louis Armstrong was the godfather of it all. I mean, every time you put on something that has his voice or what he plays on his trumpet, I mean, it's just incredible. It's timeless. It's timeless vocabulary. It's timeless language. But
his sound is so signature that you can't mistake it for anything else.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was him and Miles, right, who really kind of were these 2 bastions of beautiful stuff. And Chet, of course. Chet. Yes, of course. Yeah. Chet too. So when did you start playing the piano? When did you get into sort of? I know you have a love for stride piano, which we'll get to. But when was your first exposure to improvisation?
It was kind of random. So I started learning again towards the end of school, maybe class 8 or 9. Because I remember just around the time I started playing, I had to play Bohemian Rhapsody for an inter-school competition. I was kind of shitting my pants. But it was because I just started learning around that time. But actually, I think I was in the 9th or 10th. I'm so bad with life. But it was how it usually happens, right? You had a little Casio at home and you're, playing Hindi tunes off the radio with one hand, and then somebody in the house is like, "Acha, mera bacha to music bajayega," and then ek thoda bada keyboard aa gaya, or teacher aa gaya, So that happened for a year and a half, and then I realized that the kind of music that I'm hearing in my head and what I'm being taught, they'll never meet. The teacher that I had was a lovely gentleman, but there was a huge gap in the knowledge that I needed to, uh, to get. So then I went to the Delhi School of Music, and I was, Johnny sir took my interview, the admissions interview, and I heard him play, and I was just like, holy cow, like that is unbelievable. And he assigned me a different teacher because his schedule was full, and I came for my first class, and I took a class with the teacher, and after class I went right down to Johnny sir, and I said, man, I'll come to the school if you teach me, but nobody else.
Amazing.
And he said, I'm sorry, like I don't have time. So I said, okay sir, thank you, and I left. And he called me back 3 months later saying, I made time for you. That man was just anyway. So I went for my first class with him, and in the first class I reached there, and there's a notice on the door that he's not well and he's not coming to the school. Apparently he had a triple bypass, and he was out of action. So again, I went back home thinking, okay. 4 months later, he came back. He called me again. Okay, are you still interested? I'm here. So the fact that I play the piano is so hinged on this one man's decision and his kindness to reach out to me twice, not once.
That's amazing.
Otherwise, it would not have happened without him, because he's the one who inspired me. He's the one who made me love the music. And then when I started playing with him, obviously, वो एक घर में भी होता है कि अच्छा grades करोगे, it'll help you with your admissions in college, whatever, extracurricular. And I never wanted to do the grades and stuff because, standardized testing doesn't really do it for me. So
not for me either. So
yeah. I mean, we've both done okay or well in school or whatever, but like, what does it mean? What's the point of it all? Right. So, and with music, I was very sure that music has to be on my terms and not on like schooling terms, right? And that's when, so I went to him, and in fact, one of the first tunes I did with him was, I think, Fly Me to the Moon or something, But he taught me because I'd been learning a year or two before that with this gentleman, so I was familiar with the keyboard. My technique was awful. I remember I had a huge cyst over here because of poor technique. So I spent 2 or 3 years with Sir exploring different schools of piano technique to find which suits my physiology. And it was amazing. The journey was incredible. The journey was 18 years long. And it continues even today without him.
That's incredible. I mean, it's really interesting to hear about him. I mean, this conversation is not about John, but for those who don't know, John Rayfield, I never met him, but I heard of him, and you've seen his impact as a teacher throughout the country pretty much. I mean, he's obviously one of those great teachers, not just a great jazz pianist, but a great teacher who really showed people how to, wake up in the morning and feel like, well, I can do this.
He had one very major impact on me. It's because of him that I realized that velocity is not the measure of virtuosity, but the ability to emote through your instrument is the measure of virtuosity. Can I make you feel what I want you to feel? If I can do that, then I'm a master of my instrument. And I've seen grown-up people sitting in a room and he's playing the piano burst out into tears, man. Like multiple times. And the respect I have for that man, oh my God.
No, that's really incredible. I mean, I think we're all lucky to have mentors who can ignite that fire, but also sort of let it burn, right? And and he was instrumental in creating a whole generation, 2 generations of musicians, if you will, right? I think some of the younger ones, like Rhythm and all, also studied with him, if I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, but before me as well.
Right. So 3. Incredible. Yeah. So that takes you. I mean, that's where you learned how to play, right? Now, what happened in the period before? Let's see, you finish school, before the Piano Man starts. You were involved in a big way with Jazz Utsav, with all of these things. Yeah. Tell us about that area. Yeah.
At that time, it was called the Jazz Yatra, and Yatra started I think in '83 or something. Sorry Surabji, a bunch of people across the country in Bombay as well. The Delhi chapter was Sorry Sir, Subhash Lal, Ratan Sehgal, and of course the 2 people who got me into it, Raja Uncle and Olympi Uncle. I call them, I'm sorry. So Raja Uncle is T.R. Ramakrishnan and Olympi Uncle is Arvind Dhingla. And, Olympi Uncle is called Olympi Uncle because he brought Olympus cameras to India. Raja Uncle is just, he's an old family friend. Yeah. So they knew me, they knew there's this kid who's getting into music. And I was still in school. I hadn't yet finished school. And they asked me to become an usher at the, like, come, be involved. And so then for a year or two, I was like an usher, showing people their seats and stuff. I loved it, man. It was so much fun. Then I started realizing that the stage is not being run properly. Like, sound check's always late, the show's always starting late. Sound is not the right sound for jazz, right? So then I started requesting to be involved in stage and prep. And eventually they realized that maybe I do know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Not too much, obviously, at that point, not even now. So I started getting more and more involved in the stage planning and stage management. And Astri used to handle the entire sort of liaising with Astri Ghosh. I'm sure you met her. So she's a polyglot, man. She speaks like 7-8 languages and translates between them fluently. So she used to handle all the liaising with embassies and the flights and the logistics, and I started handling the stage, getting the sound right, making sure things are running on time. So yeah, it was a lot of fun and got to meet such incredible musicians from around the world. Also understood the tinier nuances in just getting a show to run right. Like, how do you take a festival where the shows were always late, sound checks were always late, and within a year we got it back on track. It just required planning and organization.
So do you still remember your first festival where you had to sort of manage the stage?
Yes, I think it's the first or the second one. I remember it vividly because after finishing everything and the piano tuning had just finished, there was the German embassy's, Maxwell Verhoeven Steinway, 6.5-foot Steinway on stage. And I was just doodling around on it, and a guy came up behind me and tapped on my shoulder. So the first band arrived, and that guy turned out to be Karan Mahajan. Karan Joseph.
Joseph, right?
It was Kejo. That's how I met Kejo. Right. And then his whole band went to the green room. And this was, I think, at Kamani. Yeah, it was at Kamani. And Kejo, like, hey, can I get? And he still had his bag on. He didn't even go to the green room. Like, can I play the piano? And he played Misty. And I remember the first song I heard him play ever, and it was quite beautiful. Yeah.
No, that's incredible. And you're still, of course, associated with them. And I mean, they're probably going to one day when all these festivals and things are back in play. I'm sure we'll have more of this. Yeah.
Yeah, but there have been issues in getting the festival back on because of budgets and this. And
of course.
So that's why I believe in the small format, because it's just more sustainable for the long term.
Yeah.
I mean, from my understanding of it, but yeah.
So in between all of this and before the Piano Man starts, we start getting into entrepreneurship, right? We've got a bakery going. So where did that come from? That's an interesting story, because that's a parallel I remember ever since I met you. That there was this business you were running and you were gung-ho, man. You were up late at night, you were driving at 4 a.m, delivering buns somewhere. It was amazing. I mean, that was really cool.
That was actually a lot later. I started my first company when I was 16 or 17, still in school. And that was called Texol. And, I would import biometric hardware, write time attendance software for it, and sell it to like factories and stuff. And I did 2 or 3 projects like that. Then I started, figuring out like exporting Indian manufactured goods to different countries. And so I kept doing something or the other. I remember in one of my college summers, I went to teach piano in Bhutan. In another college summer, I went to work in a scientific instruments factory in Chandigarh. Then for about half a year, I worked with a simulation system company that used to make these driver training simulators. I worked in the back end of a call center. I love working. I worked and I enjoyed it. And I worked in different industries in different fields, and loved every minute of it. And I worked whether I got paid, I worked whether I didn't get paid, it didn't matter. What mattered is learning. So eventually, 2007, I went to study in, that 2 months, which was both, it was fun from the perspective of education, but it was more fun it was my first time in the US. And suddenly there's like, just burgers and alcohol and like it was a party and it was educational both.
Well, you got a Fulbright scholarship, right?
Yeah. So it was called the NUFAC scholarship, which is under the broader program.
Okay.
But yeah, so Northeastern University Fusion Arts Exchange program.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was really interesting because that's also one of the places where your mind just goes, because you suddenly interact with, there were musicians from all over the world in that program. There were 18 of us, 3 each from 6 countries.
Amazing.
And just to interact with them was just a mind-bending situation. I hadn't worked with international artists like that before. There was a Brazilian kid, Marcelo Bucato, and he's playing the piano, and he's playing like Hector Villas-Lobos and Ernesto Pascal, and I'm like, holy shit, like what is this? Like this is so complicated. And I learned about those composers, and that's how I started getting into Brazilian music. Having heard Antonio Carlos before in that João Gilberto album from a while ago, then San Gets Gilberto, Gilberto album.
Right.
Yeah, which I've also included a tune from, by the way. I think Corcovado. And you meet people. There was Adam Golding from South Africa who was a conductor, and I'm like, what the hell does a conductor do? And then I saw how much can be done with just that guy standing in front waving his arms around. It's incredible. So it was interesting from the perspective of experience, because in India it was still just bass, drums, keyboard, guitar. We were limited there. And here you got Jonathan Meacham, who's the drummer, who's sitting in the drums with a little, thing in his mouth, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And it was basically he was moistening up his clarinet's reed. And then he started playing the clarinet. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Very cool.
So you got just exposure, and then the music rooms in American universities, man. Like, it's great to have funding. You have everything.
Yeah, no, that's true.
You got grand pianos and symphonies and
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that so that kind of brings us to, and then you came back, and then soon after, Piano Man became a thing, right?
No, then the bakery came.
Then
I
the
came
bakery.
back in 7.
That's the break.
I came back in 7. Then 2008, I went for, we went to perform for UNESCO in Paris, and then we went to Mexico I went to Mexico separately for some work, which didn't work out. Otherwise, I would have been in Mexico now and not in India. And then I came. Then in that winter, I went to study architecture with scientist Dr. Helmut Koster in Frankfurt for a project with ILFS EcoSmart, which then fell through because of the housing slump, and then they canned all the projects that we were working on. So it was just like those years. Every month was like, okay, what am I doing now? I was both dedicated and directionless in a way. Then 2010, the bakery opened, and 10 and 11 was just trying to figure out the food industry, which honestly I'm still doing today. And 2012 is when the Piano Man began. The first iteration of the Piano Man, the art cafe.
Right. Well, I have to say that has a very special place in my heart, because it was around 2016 that I started really sort of hanging out there, and it's what really, I was.
No, you came to the Piano Man Jazz Club in Safdar.
No, way before that, Arjun. Actually, what really, really struck me, and what
then it would have been 2014, not 16. So we
14.
Closed it in 14.
14. Yeah. 14. It was one of those, and I remember a few concerts. I think it was a Horace Silver tribute or something.
Yeah,
those were defining moments for me as I had a different career as a professional, and it was it was a night like that, which for me made me think about being a professional musician and really getting into jazz. And I think honestly, those are having places that value music and where music comes first. I remember you didn't even have a booze license. I think you were serving iced teas and great food.
But it was vegetarian.
It was vegetarian, yeah, and you made it work with all of those, and I think that was really sort of inspiring. That was the launch pad for this, right? So
that's where it all began.
Yeah, and in some ways that's also where kind of my journey as a musician began, as aspiring jazz artist, I'd say. So it's great that you did that. And then what's important for everyone who's listening is that the Piano Man, the Art Cafe, as it was originally called, iterated into many things after that. And I think what I would like to know is, first of all, where did that name really sort of solidify itself? When? And more importantly, what were those first few steps that you had to take to make this a brand?
Okay, so the name is actually really interesting. We didn't have a name till 3 weeks before the launch. We didn't have a signboard up. We didn't know what to do. And the leading contender for names at that point was the Good Life Cafe. I had a WhatsApp group, and it would have been quite a disaster if it had been called that. But in fact, we were sitting at home. My brother was in Delhi, and with my sister-in-law was here, Vaishnavi. I remember we were sitting in the living room, and I was doodling on the piano. My father said, "Why not just call it the Piano Man?" It was just like one of those moments, that
Very cool.
we slept over it a day, we slept over it 2 days. It sounded better every following day, and we're like, okay, it's done. If you sleep over something and it sounds better, the idea sounds better the next day, it's probably a good idea.
That's amazing.
So that's how we got named. Yeah. Now, in terms of brand, so we've never really, our intent in terms of the actions we've taken has never been build a brand. Our intent has always been do the work.
Right.
And everything will follow. And it was really hard because, we entered industry, we didn't know, so obviously we were losing money like crazy. We opened a big jazz club with lots of debt. We were still losing money like crazy. Then we had that fiasco in Gurgaon when we were starting our first project. We lost so much money there. And suddenly we were just bleeding like crazy. And we were like, ab to nahi ho sakta. The brand has to close. But the only reason it survived is also my folks, man. They've always been like...
Yeah, your parents are very...
It's fine.
Yeah.
They're
also... Well, what's interesting is that you're partners, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're all four of you are partners, all five of you, and I think that's really, really incredible because it's a place where you're honest with each other and you're able to kind of balance each other out in a very, very constructive way. But I don't want to rush through that journey of the Piano Man because a lot of people haven't really been to Delhi, especially in our network, students and things, and I want to describe a little bit about the experience of the Piano Man. So tell us a little bit about what was the aesthetic of that first stage. And I think that those who are tuning in now and may tune in later this evening, go to the website, get an idea of what the Piano Man stage is like. There's lots of videos. You can look for concerts that I've done, friends have done. And you'll see something really special and intimate. And where did that idea for that stage come from? That's the Safdarjung stage.
Yeah. So when we did the art cafe, there was an upright piano there, which bought from one of Dad's friends who moved back from London. And I used to sit and play it the whole day. That's pretty much it. Like I was the artist every day because it was a tiny little cafe. We had almost no revenues. We had no understanding of how to pay people. Then a few musicians started coming in saying that we want to play, so just sort of ticket and the ticket used to be like 3,000 rupees, 4,000 rupees, and people would come and play. I had a quartet at that point with Yohei Saito on trombone, Shifumi on bass, and Vasudevan on drums. We started playing Sunday.
I remember that. Yeah.
And then we would have stand-up comedy and poetry and magic and like a lot of interesting things happening. And so a couple of things started crystallizing slowly over time in my head on how I want to present these things. And in fact, I remember one of the first times Paddy played at the club. There was a rishta conversation happening in the club. There was a couple meeting. The arranged marriage meeting.
Right.
And Paddy was performing, and that table was really loud. They were noisy. And Paddy turned to me and said, "What? I can't play with them." So I said, "Why? Let's tell them." So at that time, I didn't know that it's okay for me to go to a customer and say, "Hey, keep quiet." So Paddy did it. And they got super pissed and they started screaming and shouting at me outside the club, outside the cafe, the first little cafe. And I'm like, "Hey, man, artist choice." It's like Sophie's choice. I actually don't know what Sophie's choice is.
Well, artist choice.
Artist choice. Yeah, it just sounded, that came to mind. Yeah. Artist choice. And so that action that happened then, 4 years later, became the foundation of the silent song. All right? So a lot of these things that happened in the first iteration of the Piano Man, which is a little cafe, were foundational in understanding that.
So what is the silent song?
Okay. So the silent song is something we started about 3 months into the first club that we opened, the Piano Man Jazz Club, where, there's music happening every night and people are loud. And I'm tired of going around telling them to shut up individually. So, I just got on stage and I just sort of went extempore and said, ladies and gentlemen, you have these musicians on stage and they're here right now. You see them in this moment, but they spent the last 20 years preparing to be here to play for you. Right? Now, and the first time around, it wasn't so structured in the sense. I was just kind of spitballing off the top of my head, trying to remove the desensitization that an audience has. Because you're so involved with your own shit. Like, I've got my social media, I've got my friends, I got my drink, party ho rahi hai, whatever. So, but I'm like, hey, you're in a space for music. So if you allow yourself to share that space with the artist, that respect, that mutual respect needs to form, it is an entirely different experience. Yeah. And so then I was like, hey, shut the bar, stop service, I send my entire team out of the club. And then it was just me and the artist and the customers, the audience. And I was like, all right, for one song, you can't move, you can't talk, your phones have to be down, nothing, like, don't even, like, whisper. And just absolute pin drop silence, and let's try it and see what happens.
Right.
So it wasn't like, I wasn't trying to antagonize someone. I was just trying to say, hey, why don't you try, like, 3 minutes of your time, 4 minutes of your time, right? You're with me for 4 hours, just give me 4 minutes. And it was unbelievable, man.
Yeah.
The entire space turned into a little,
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, I want to add that there's a feedback loop, right? And that is that eventually it actually becomes a point at which if you play, like we played a lot at the Piano Man, and whenever I design a set, it's always centered around the silent song.
Yeah.
Where you think, well, okay, so how does this? It becomes a pivot point, and it is really special. Yeah. It is music first, and it is artist first, and it is, well, it's right there. So
in fact,
that was really,
I always try to be my own critic. So just for example, right now in this post-second wave, I can't say post-pandemic because it isn't over yet, but the post-second wave and even the post-first wave, we've been less particular about noise levels in the club because we just, especially getting back to business, we were so desperate to have customers that we would apologize to the artist and say, if somebody's really bothering you, let me know. I will deal with it. Otherwise, we're not going to individually go and tell people to shut it.
Right.
And I know that that's affecting the atmosphere of the club, but the intent is that when things are a little more normal and we are able to survive on our own feet, we would go back to how we've always been.
Yeah, there's always a middle ground, Arj. We've all got to just do what we can do.
So. Yeah, it's such a, it's such a, at a strategic and operations level, it's such a weird time because everything else, yes, of course, it's been horrendous for for everyone around the world. But how in an environment like ours, where there's such specific operational protocols to maintain systems or to create systems to account for our core ideology, yet create room for
business.
Whatever. Not music, so that's a core ideology, but create room for people to be people and not patrons. Yeah. I mean,
that's no. Look, no. I mean, I think this is an evolution, right? I mean, anybody who can. Our job as musicians is also to survive, but it's also to create ecosystems where people can come and thrive. And for that, you have to, at some point, be an entrepreneur. I mean, if you are running a business or like for us, a school, for you, you're a venue. And I think that it isn't so black and white. I think the intent, as you said, is pure, and you've got to do what you can to get you to the next season, at least to start, right? Otherwise, there's no music. So I think
that's always been my point. It's like, get to that minimum viability situation where no matter what happens, you're viable.
Yeah.
Right? Viability doesn't mean making a profit often. Viability means just like stemming the losses. So instead of losing like, a bag of gold, you lose a coin.
But there is now an ecosystem of the Piano Man brand. I mean, it's no longer, it is a brand. It is something that has evolved from just being a space where people come and play at one venue. You have two venues, one's in Gurugram, one's in Safdarjung. You've got artist management. You've got this artist management company which is doing really well. So tell us a little bit about.
Not at the moment.
Well,
it's been burned dry for 1.5 years.
Well, it will. Yeah, but it was a natural extension of all of this, right? It was a full.
Did I not tell you that we are trying to build a Gurgaon-sized venue in Delhi as well?
Oh, I didn't know that. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen to our old haunt?
Okay, so what we're doing right now for the first time ever is an equity raise, and we're raising money through that route so that we can build a larger venue in Delhi. Okay, and the reason we're doing that is because we realize that our viability comes from capacity. And the one thing that Safdarjung doesn't have, Safdarjung has all the soul in the world, but it doesn't have capacity. Right. And then what we'll do is we'll turn Safdarjung into what I've always intended it to be, a pure jazz club.
So you keep that open. Great. Right? Okay.
Yeah. And we run it totally differently, and we trim down the number of people that can come into that place. Not to be exclusive, but just so that the experience is better for everyone. It's not crowded. And let the larger clubs be the sort of out there, the big venues. Not that they're much bigger, but they're definitely bigger. And also we also then create two brands. We have the Piano Man, like the Piano Man Gurugram, the Piano Man New Delhi, the Piano Man maybe Mumbai later. This is the larger format. And then we have the Piano Man Jazz Club format, which is the small, intimate. Yeah. And so it's all evolution that's happening over time. And we also have to evolve. I had this beautiful conversation with a couple of senior musicians on the scene a couple of days ago, where a couple of musicians are also, there's always been two kinds of musicians who understand what we're doing and are okay with what we're doing. And musicians who say, hey man, Piano Man doesn't pay fairly or this or that, because at the end of the day, the fee is not a giant fee or anything. It's a build of the market fee for the country. But at the same time, what we bring to the table is timely payments to artists. We're one of the only clubs in the world that has you can eat and drink whatever you want when you're performing.
Right.
There's no gaps. Also shows every single day, 3,000 shows over the last 5 years now, which isn't a joke, right? But at the same time, for me, it's always been at an ethical level. Am I okay with the decisions that we've taken? And I realize that as the scene is evolving, and we're a part of that evolution of the scene, we also need to reassess what we are doing and how we can continue to contribute positively to the scene. So in fact, right now, after the conversations that I've had, we are reworking a new future plan for payouts to artists to increase them more and more and more over time, to scale them up. And we're hoping that, at the end of the day, it slowly, because the scene today is so much more mature than it was 5 years ago.
Sure, that's
true. And the scene today is exponentially bigger than it was 20 years ago when I hit the scene. So the core of what we're doing is.
But I have a little question here. See, this is an interesting point, because there's a natural sort of capacity here, right? Which is the number of artists at some point, right? Especially in a scene. Yeah. So go ahead. So how does what?
We are both a part of the growth of the scene. How? The two things that I believe are critical to the formation and expansion of culture, of any specific subgenre of culture, are education and exposure.
Correct.
It's always the root of what's happening, right? And it's a vicious circle. So what we decided to do was catch it from one end or one half of the circle, which is exposure. And we said, when more and more people are exposed to a specific sound or something new,
correct,
both audiences and artists will be formed.
Yeah.
I'm just realizing that I've shaved unevenly.
That's okay. Anyway. I do it every day.
So audiences and artists, where with exposure, more and more people who come in to listen to music every day will be able to take a subjective decision. Do I like this or not? And that's your decision. It's not mine. And it's okay for you not to like it. It's okay for you to walk in and Arjun Sagar Gupta on the piano and you're like, I don't like this shit. It's fine, right? Who am I to sort of govern your sensibility? But there'll be some people who say, oh, maybe this is interesting. Maybe if I listen to it again. And there'll be some people who say, oh shit, this is really interesting. I like it. And there'll be some people who are like, oh, I already know this, and I do love it. So that's a function of exposure. You're allowing people to make that subjective decision by showing them what is possible. And after they make the decision, they might come back and say, I did really like that, and I want to be here more. So that's the core process that we've been working with. Like over time, over span of 5 years, how much of an audience can we build by just being there?
Yeah.
The second thing is from the education perspective. So for the audience, for the audiences, the artists, when artists see that this is how we can, it's great. Already exposure has gone up so much because of YouTube and iTunes and Spotify and whatever else. But in the physical sense, to be there and to see music being made, and to interact with these artists and to talk to them is it's an elevating experience.
Yeah, I mean that's where I think that's the caveat, right? I mean not the caveat, but the critical point of actually finding inspiration too. It's not just from finding a good mentor, but it's actually looking and seeing that something's possible, and you can see yourself on a stage, which you can't really do on YouTube. So actually it's true. So that's incredible. So you're going to have a new venue hopefully, and you're going to have a dedicated jazz club. I'm all about that. I think that's going to be fun. Maybe we'll have to visit Delhi a little more often. So.
Yeah, man, it's been way too long since I've seen you. But yeah.
So and I want to just talk a little bit about the other things that have been happening, right? One is even last year, there was some really interesting, great conversations that you had with artists. You had Kurt Rosenwinkel. You had some. Were there any sort of standout? You should check those out. They're on YouTube, and I think they're also on Arjun's Facebook.
No, they're not on YouTube.
Oh, they're not on YouTube. Okay.
Yeah. I actually haven't got around to sitting and editing them for YouTube, but right now they're on our face. Yeah, they're on our Facebook Live page on TPM Cafes, the Piano Man Jazz Club.
Yeah, those were really fun.
We touched 90 interviews.
Incredible. That's industrious.
So everyone from a Leslie Lewis and Sukhbir, Sukhbir, by the way, everyone knows him from Oh Ho Ho Ho, and they think he's like a Punjabi bad boy. Dude, that guy is a sweetheart. He is such a nice person. It's not even funny.
Amazing.
When I spoke to him, he was sitting and repairing his own air conditioner in Dubai.
That's cool.
Yeah. To Aaron Parks and Kurt Rosenwinkel and David Fuzinski and
No, those are. Please do check those out. There's some real gems in those conversations, and they're on YouTube. Well, they will be. Are you ever going to put them on YouTube? I think you should.
Yes, I've got them all. Like I'm actually. I need to upgrade my computer because when I started doing video editing, because of all of this, suddenly realized it's taking me like 3 days to get an edit done because it's 8 years old. My computer hasn't been turned off for 8 years.
Wow. Well.
It hasn't been turned off for 8 years.
Well,
I mean, maybe to restart off it.
If you ever bring your computer to Goa, we can arrange for that to happen almost on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, it's an exaggeration, obviously, but in the sense that it's kind of conceptually been on for 8 years. Yeah.
Let's just
we can't take this shit.
Walk us through a little bit of this playlist. Again, for those of you who've been joining later, the playlist is available on all 3 platforms: Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Music. You can just check the link on in the bio, and you can go right through it. I mean, look at this. We've got some real classics. We've got Louis Armstrong. We've got Art Tatum. I mean, that's where it all began.
I'll explain. I'm going to run through this because when you asked me to make the playlist, I did some thinking. It's not just randomly.
Good.
Every track, including Bohemian Rhapsody, Bohemian Rhapsody for me is like one of the most. It's the only like suddenly weird track that pops into this, but I think it's a piece of art. For me, it's not music. It is a painting that should be hanging on a wall. But and so is every other piece on this. So the reason I started with Louis Armstrong, Loveless Love, is that comes from an album called Louis Armstrong Plays W.C. Handy, which I explained earlier is how I started listening to jazz. Right? Then after that, the order is not exact, but after that should be Art Tatum. Art Tatum. In fact, I heard Hummerest is. I heard it somewhere and it was really low quality, this thing. When I heard him play, I was just like my mind melted. One of the most incredible piano players that has ever lived.
Absolutely.
In fact, Vladimir Horowitz, who's one of the great sort of classical performers, said that if Tatum ever became a classical musician, he would stop playing the piano. that's the significance of Art Tatum. And if you like pianists, you have to listen to. There's a very loud breathing sound, buddy. Are you okay?
Not from me. I think there's a.
From
is
me?
this a, maybe. Anyway, it's not.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Oh, that's weird. So yeah, Tatum is he's just unbelievable. So do please, if nothing else, please go and check out Art Tatum. Then for many years, for about 3 or 4 years, I used to wake up. My alarm clock was a specific song from one of Chet Baker's early albums. When I heard this song, I was like, wouldn't it be nice to wake up to this? And that's what I did for many years. And I don't know why I don't do it right now. Maybe because my timings are so weird that I don't want the alarm to be super loud and inconvenient.
Yeah,
But
you don't
it
wake
was
up. You just sleep through.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, you're up all the time, rather.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a early Chet Baker album called Grey December, and the song is I Wish I Knew. And it's a beautiful album. I got the entire Chet Baker discography some time ago, many years ago. And the entire discography is just a ridiculously large number. Hey, Manta. Large number of albums that he's been on. And he started with the Jerry Mulligan big band, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
This is.
And yeah.
But hold on, we skipped a few. I mean, you don't have to go through the whole thing. But
No, I'm coming back. I'm going back and forth.
Okay.
Because then it's the triumvirate of piano players. Like I already mentioned Art Tatum, and there's Oscar Peterson and Bill Evans.
Of course.
Right? I know for a lot of people it's like Keith Jarrett. For me, it's like Keith Jarrett or Bill Evans, and I'll explain why I love Keith Jarrett. And purists love Keith Jarrett's when he's soloing. I personally find that distracting because I'm trying to focus on the notes, and I've been shouted at by Keith Jarrett purists, and that is a part of his music. It is a part of his music.
You're talking about his vocal. Let me just put that in context. That's the vocalization.
Vocalization.
Yeah.
But his vocalization is actually like, it just sounds like the same. Okay, and it takes away from the bloody note he's saying, and I'm sure I'm going to get hate mail for this, but yeah. I love Keith Jarrett, but for me, Bill Evans is somebody who, when you look at a painting, you have the object of the painting like a flower vase, and for vase or vase or however you pronounce it, is American or British, and then you got the color which tells you the emotion of the painting. So if you paint all the leaves gray and you paint all the flowers brown, it's the same painting is dead. There's no emotion left in it. You brighten it up and use beautiful colors. For me, Bill Evans' harmony is that color.
Right.
The way he uses harmony completely changes the way that you perceive a tune. And that's how harmony generally is, but Bill Evans is the master of it. And for me, that's why it's just like, there's so many people who tell a phenomenal story, but how many people can emote that story so effectively? And for me, that's why Bill Evans. And Oscar Peterson is just like,
of course.
Hey, look, mama, no hand. Like, he's just a technical genius, right? And I always found his persona and his face to be so happy. And then there's okay, so that covers those guys, Peterson. Then I saw a biopic on Glenn Miller's life, and this is, I think, from the MGM or post-MGM era where they used to make these musicals and stuff. And so I started listening to Glenn Miller, but this song, Moonlight Serenade, is, I don't know why, but it speaks to me. I just love this song. And I heard it maybe 15 years ago, and it's very emotional for me. Like, I feel the song. Okay, I'm quickly running. Ruben Gonzalez, that's now number 4. One of my top piano players of all time. Ruben Gonzalez, for people who don't know, was the pianist for Buena Vista Social Club. Yeah. So, Buena Vista, I've got a Buena Vista track on this also, I think Chan Chan, most probably. And Buena Vista, so it opens up Cuba. Like,
yeah, and that was Rai Kuda's project, right?
Yeah, so there's actually a wonderful documentary on Buena Vista Social Club. Because a lot of these guys grew up in abject poverty, man. And they made some of the most beautiful music, and it's here for all of us, for the rest of humanity, hopefully. And Ruben Gonzalez was somebody like that. I saw a very late video of his before he passed, and they were bringing him to the piano to play, and it just looked like 2 people are carrying a coat hanger. Oh. He was quite literally a bag of clothes. And when he sat down and his fingers started moving, suddenly it was just like, he's just him. There's no difference. Amazing. And that's the beauty of music, right? So introducing was Ruben's own album. Like, it was his project. And I don't know how I found it. Maybe in the time that I was sort of or maybe it was one of my dad's youngest brother's CDs. But it was when I heard it and I heard his style of playing, his expressiveness. It's beautiful. Then the next tune is another Cuban tune called La Comparsa. This is not the version that I love. The version that I love is actually on YouTube. It is Bebo Valdez and Chucho Valdez playing two pianos across each other, father and son, and that is. And there's a story behind that. And the story is that, because Chucho sort of defected to the US while Cuba was still under embargo. So father and son couldn't meet for a very long time. And then after the embargo opened, somebody organized a meeting. And this is the legend behind the video. It probably is obviously, maybe, I don't know, probably not true. But apparently they were sort of made to sit across each other and play the tune and then met. It's obviously impossible that you get them to the studio. They would obviously, but just the story elevates the story. Yeah. But just check out La Comparsa, Bebo, Chucho Valdez on YouTube.
Check it out.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Then Benny Goodman, man. It's the first time that I fell in love with the sound of, even though Glenn Miller, by the way, the other thing about Glenn Miller we spoke about earlier is the way that he uses, those tight, strung together harmonies to create these vocal lines, but what happens when you're creating those tight harmonies, that all the instruments work as one and becomes one instrument, right? And then you have somebody like a Benny Goodman who's like a clarinet like god. And again, I used to watch a lot of those musicals and biopics, and that's how I heard about him, and I absolutely adore his music.
And for those of you who are interested, there's Mike Marino has been doing a lot of, who's a great guitar player, great jazz guitar player, has been doing a series of analysis on standards, and it's beautiful. It's very, very human. It's not, you don't have to just be a musician to watch this. And you should check it out because he does cover a bunch of, Moonlight Serenade and things like that, which were really great Glenn Miller tunes. So, yeah, it's great that you put that in there.
Is there a 1 hour limit on this? Because we're going to hit that in 5 minutes, I think.
No, just go for it.
Oh, I thought Insta Live had the limit. Okay.
No, Insta Live.
Oh, then Rita Lee, I don't know why, but like, it's not, in terms of technically and all, but it's just one of my feel-good albums. Rita Lee did this album, I used to always think it's Beatles and Bossa because somebody gave it to me named Beatles and Bossa, but it's actually called Aki Ali M. Kaker Lugar, So, it's basically all of Beatles. The entire album is just Beatles songs done in a bossa nova style.
That's amazing.
Stunning.
I have to check that.
Stunning. Yeah. Then is the one anomaly in my playlist, which is Bohemian Rhapsody, which I love. Then again, in terms of crooners, the first really incredible singer that I heard was Ella Fitzgerald, right. and outside of Louis Armstrong. So that's why I put in the song that I really love, Tenderly. You know it?
Of course. So,
yeah.
Dude, there's and I mean, Ella was really the godfather of. I mean, she was not only great at commanding all of these incredible musicians, Duke Ellington, and Joe Pass, but I mean, she was a great improviser. Like she really sort of went into it. So, yeah.
I wanted to put Joe Pass in as well, but I had already hit 2 hours, and you told me to make a 1 hour playlist. So I was like, okay. Let the guitar players handle the guitar players. Yeah. The next guy on the list, by the way, Sammy Davis Jr. was a part of the Rat Pack. Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis. A lot of people don't know Sammy Davis. In my uneducated opinion. Hey son, how you doing? Oh man, I hope you know Sammy Davis, man. Sammy Davis was perhaps one of the most incredible. No, not you, Karan. I'm talking to.
Oh, okay.
I think that Sammy Davis was quite possibly, one of the most incredible entertainers that has ever lived. Just to the videos of him performing are. He's a master of owning the stage, of stagecraft, and a phenomenal singer, of course.
But have you seen? There's this video of him, playing. I think it was like Cherokee or
with
something.
the Rat Pack.
No, it's insane. I mean, he's got these brushes and it's at like 300 BPM, and he's just playing. It's unbelievable.
Wait. Are we talking about the right person? I'm talking about Sammy Davis Jr.
Sammy Davis Jr. You have to
he played drums?
Point being that he was this unbelievable entertainer, and he could
Holy
really
shit.
play.
Yeah,
I
he
mean,
is. Yeah.
it wasn't. I mean,
He
you should
could,
see the
and
comments in that
he
video.
could dance, dude. Yeah.
He could dance. He could do all of that. Yeah.
Send me that video, man. I don't know how I haven't seen it. I've literally dug up and
I'll
like
tell you what.
bought or downloaded.
I'll put it up. I'll put it up on Monday on our Found on the Web.
Done. Done. All right, then gets Gilberto, again an early influential album for me because I started listening to, Antonius Carlos Jobim because of that very album, the Gets Gilberto album, which has got beautiful sort of, Jobim compositions. Then there's a pianist named Earl Hines. Now Earl Hines I discovered much later in life. Yeah.
Right.
But Earl Hines, and again, it comes from my love of stride, and Earl sort of goes back. Earl Hines, Mary Lou Williams, and a couple.
Right.
I don't know why I forgot about adding Mary Lou, but yeah. But Earl Hines has got this. He's another person who makes the piano sing.
Right.
There are very few people who can genuinely make the sound so natural and organic, like it just feels like the instrument is singing. And Earl Hines, I have this one video of a concert of his in Germany, and it's got Earl Hines and then Teddy Wilson and then a bunch of different musicians. And I've got Teddy Wilson in this also because of that concert. And similarly, like Teddy Wilson is somebody who's got, but Teddy Wilson, and specifically I picked the song Laura because first the song is gorgeous. Like, you know it, obviously you know it. Who doesn't know it?
Of course.
Right? And then, okay, I'm going to keep moving on. I'm very cognizant of the time. George Shearing.
Yeah.
George Shearing, I had a DVD of George Shearing and Neil Swainson performing as a duo. And I've been watching that for like 11 years as a child. And then, I had a Canadian band come down to India and they were performing. And we're sort of in the middle of the show. He played the Delhi show. They played the Delhi show. Then we came to Gurgaon. Obviously, band came home. We ate. We drank together. And we're in Gurgaon. And suddenly, in the middle of the second show, Rhythm, who's sitting on the mezzanine in Gurgaon, sends me a message saying, Neil Swainson played with George Shearing. And suddenly, and I didn't put two and two together. The guys on my stage, I'd been listening to him play for 15 years.
Amazing. That's very cool.
And just a mind-melting moment. The bass player, Neil Swainson, obviously, because George Shearing isn't around. But yeah, George Shearing was, like Art Tatum, a visually impaired pianist, but that didn't stop him. Yeah. Just incredible. And I chose a song with Carmen McRae because, again, it was very early. This specific song, I Don't Stand a Ghost of a Chance with You, I heard early on in my introduction to jazz, and again, it's hauntingly beautiful. James P. Johnson. Oh, Karen Allison. You know Karen Allison?
Yeah. No, doesn't she? I mean,
lesser known.
Yeah. And she plays the upright, doesn't she? Is she the?
No.
Yeah.
She's a pianist and singer.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I actually met her in Chicago in 2018. And it was a bit of a starstruck moment. Again, the first album of Karen's I got, I think, has got Footprints, the one that I got, which was obviously Miles Davis's music. And, Wayne Shorter's music. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Cardinal sin. Anyway, so I didn't know who she was. I hadn't heard about her. By the way, do you know Joey, who's just logged in?
No, I don't.
Dude, he's a 5-year-old phenomenal drummer.
Wow.
He's actually he's played a couple of guest spots, with different bands at the club. One night, just not so long ago, he came with his folks. His folks are lovely. They came to the club, and Joey's like 5-year-old kid with all the energy, running up. He's the only kid that I'm allowed to run up and down my club, dude. And then he got on stage, and he's like an Energizer bunny, dude. He's amazing. And on. Okay, back to Karen Allison.
Now wait a minute. Now before we continue, so I want to put this in perspective, right? Like we have the playlist. Some of us are not have just tuned into this series, right? The idea of having a playlist like this is to give a perspective as to why someone enjoys music and what makes them tick. So if you look at this playlist, a lot of this has what Arjun has been influenced by over the years, which is the real classics, not just the pianist, not just as a piano player, but the music that kind of really was the soundtrack of his life. And actually a lot of them are. I mean, like, look at this, Round Midnight, I Don't Stand a Ghost of a Chance, Moonlight.
Yeah. Goa internet situations, no?
it's all right. It's one of those things you have to deal with.
But not bad. I mean, you ran for 57 minutes without a blip, so this is okay. Yeah. Okay. So Karen Allison, I mean, I grew up listening to her sing simply because I had an album, and eventually I got all her albums, and I think people know. Oh my God, my mind has gone blank. Who's the other Canadian pianist singer who's super famous?
Who are you talking about? You're not talking about Diana Krall's American.
Yeah, Diana Krall. So Diana Krall's Canadian.
Are you sure? Well, if she is, good for her.
But whatever. She's one of the two. Today, definitely. Don't say these things. Anyway, so Karen Allison to me is she should be at least as famous as Diana Krall. She is in the sort of jazz purist circles, but she's incredible, and listen to her sing. Her voice is stunning. Then I just wanted to put a throwback to somebody I discovered a little later when I got into stride, which is like one of the fathers of stride, James Johnson. And this is really early on. Like, so there isn't so much stuff for James Johnson. And there's so many, like, when you start getting into this space, there's a lot of pianists like Earl Father Hines, Fats Waller. We already covered Earl Hines. Fats Waller is another one of my favorites. But if I went into the whole pianist thing, then I'd be there for like a few days. Yeah.
I do want to point out, there's a great resource for all of this, especially the early stride. There's a great playlist. There's a great book by Ted Goya called The History of Jazz. And the first two chapters are really on, the origins of jazz from New Orleans and beyond. And it focuses on, Earl Hines, and you can hear all this music. They made playlists for it. It's outstanding. And it's incredible to see.
Send me the name.
I'll send you the link. But I mean, if it weren't for stride, so much of the motivic and the technical development of contemporary jazz wouldn't have taken place. So it's actually cool to hear this, and for at least some of the people who are in our school and our network to hear stride. We've been listening to so much other stuff, so this is great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so I mean, stride is just. It's also like I wish I could play it properly. It's one of those. So hard to play.
It is.
But then you go and Fats Waller, and so like Fats Waller is another one of my favorite, like absolute favorites in life. But again, I didn't put him in here to sort of stick to the core, but I've heard like everything Fats Waller's recorded. Then I've got my two favorite classical composers, Chopin and Franz Liszt. Yeah, and Liszt, Franz Liszt. Now, Chopin is everyone knows the nocturnes and etudes and stuff. But my favorite pieces of Chopin were the 4 ballades he wrote. Ballade number 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 in G minor. In fact, I played the 1 in G minor almost completely. Took me a very long time because of my inconsistent practice habits. And I never played it properly. But yeah, I mean, it's just stunning. Like, I love this. Sometimes just randomly in the middle of the day, this is what I want to hear, And with Liszt, and specifically, I took a performance by Zifra. Is this Hungarian pianist who I think gave his first concert at the age of 5 or something. He was a Hungarian gypsy pianist, something like that. There, I've seen videos of Zifra like rehearsing and warming up, and his rehearsal is better than any concert I would ever play in my life. Like his warm up for a concert, it's just he's stunning, and Liszt, because I first heard Liszt. A lot of lists like Tom and Jerry, like 1967 concert cat. So and I heard that, and with my piano teacher, just 2 or 3 years into playing piano, I said I want to play this tune, Hungarian Rhapsody number 2, which is like a virtuoso great piece. It's ridiculous how hard he is. He didn't say no to me, man. He said, okay, we'll work slowly and methodically and acquire the techniques required to play each part of it. That actually accelerated my piano playing practically, at least at a practical level, years ahead. But I picked something that I should have picked after 15 years on the instrument in my second year. Then Mingus, now the thing about Mingus, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, I mean, finish that.
Yeah. So Mingus, I think like my mom is on the line, so I'm a little, I shouldn't say this, but the first time I heard Mingus is because I read somewhere that Mingus was the best music for sex. And this is before I knew what sex was. Okay, it's just like it was this like mystery thing which is supposed to be also cool, and somebody said Mingus is like the best music for sex. So I was like, and I'm telling everyone the same thing. I'm like, listen to Mingus, it's the best music for sex, and I have no idea what I mean by that. But I decided to listen to Mingus because of that. And Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, it's been like, oh my god, I love this song.
I mean, it's a great tune. It's a great
Yeah,
tune actually there are
yeah,
three great tunes here that we have in our core curriculum around midnight. Goodbye Pork Pie
yeah.
Hat and Sea Jam Blues. I mean, that's where it's really at.
See, Jam, it's about Peterson taking like the simplest thing, Jam, and making it just, oh my god. Have you
But
seen that?
this is really interesting because C-Jam is really a test to get it right, and it's really interesting because if you look at there's a version not only this but also Red Garland trio with Paul Chambers
Yeah,
and
oh.
Art Taylor. It was incredible. I mean, it's amazing how you could take this really simple melody but take it to places which you just can't imagine, and this is a great version. This is really cool.
Yeah. Peterson, most of what he does is a great version. And I think there's
that's also true.
There's a Montreux Jazz Festival or something where Peterson is playing with Nels Orsted, Pedersen and Ray Brown. Like it's
Right.
piano and two basses. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is. Yeah.
Yeah. I have the video.
Yeah.
I'll send it if you don't have it.
I think.
And there's a part in the middle where Peterson just takes off like a supersonic jet, and Ray Brown and Pedersen are just looking at each other and just
trying to keep up.
They're laughing. They're like, no, they just stop playing. They just start looking at each other and laughing. And Peterson is just like, and
amazing.
Not only was Peterson like, the thing is, Peterson wasn't just look at me go. It was still so musical and so beautiful that's something. I closed my laptop where I had the playlist open because we've already covered the next two pieces.
Well, also Peterson. It's important to talk about Peterson because it's great that we have these documentaries and these clips on YouTube because you can see what an ambassador of music and jazz he was, right? I mean, he was not only this technically proficient musician and leader and all the other stuff.
That's also why he was technically proficient, right? Because I think apparently till his 30s he was a classical pianist. And his father used to like lock him in a room for 12 hours a day to practice.
No,
Hey, Tarun.
Hi, Tarun. What's up? No, he had the chops, but he had this context, and he gave people a context. And I think that was amazing. Like there used to be these concerts in the early 70s and 80s where people like they would sort of travel around Herb Ellis, Tarun Balani. Tarun.
Yeah.
I just saw your thing.
Yeah. Tarun, I don't have my trumpet with me today. Yeah.
But they were real ambassadors. They'd go and they'd talk about music, they talk about jazz, they talk about this in front of these audiences and really sort of get them excited. Yeah. And I thought seeing those videos are incredible.
It's what guys like Wynton Marsalis and Herbie Hancock and all doing today, right? Like they're out there.
Yeah.
But in a different era, different accessibility still.
Yeah. I mean, I think it isn't dead yet. I think this is 2.0. So I think we're all doing what we can to keep this alive, but more importantly, have fun with it. And I think the context of music and jazz and
the music keeps itself alive, man. Our responsibility is just ensuring that people get a chance to listen to it.
Yeah.
And if 100 people listen to it, maybe 5 or 10 or maybe 50 will like it. Yeah. And the music will keep itself alive. All we got to do is just make sure it's playing somewhere so that somebody can hear it.
Well, that's how I became a musician. So that's certainly where the story starts and hopefully one day stops. I just wanted to thank you for Arjun. I wanted to thank you for doing this and talking to us about the idea of what the Piano Man was and is going to be. For everyone who's going to check out this playlist over the course of the weekend, it's really fantastic. It's nice to actually get to hear some of these incredible, stride pianists and all this other. This is a really great and a very diverse set list. So dig into it. And I'm just really grateful you did this. Thank you for coming on board. And for those of
I miss you, man. I hope to see you soon.
Well, one day we'll make it back to Delhi at some point.
Better.
But I think if you're planning to visit Delhi, then make it a point to get to the Piano Man either in Gurugram, Gurgaon, or Delhi and in Safdarjung, and go and enjoy some great music and go and listen to Arjun play as well if you get a chance. So can we see a
One
little bit
sec,
of the
we can
club?
do a little,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, sorry, man.
All right.
There you go. So we got Copycats playing today.
Oh, lovely.
Scott has said,
Nice.
if you permit me, I'll jump on at the end of the night for a tune. All right, that's the club.
All right.
So where I was sitting with my ring light reflecting off the top to try to create better lighting.
Oh, it's great. It's good. It worked out well. So for those of you who are tuning in now, check out this interview. We've just launched our Music Foundation course, so find out more about that on our Instagram. We've got our Saturday Jam tomorrow for students, so come on in if you're in Goa. And lots of love to all. Arjun, thank you. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, my friend.
For tuning in.
Absolutely. Have a great evening, all of you. Have a great time.
How do I?
How do I stop? Oh, yeah. Excellent. I don't use Instagram, man.
I got it.